is recording now. Welcome everyone to today's session. As part of International Women's Day, the Hate Crime Research Group welcomes guest speaker Anda Solea, PhD candidate and lecturer in cybercrime in the School of Criminology and Criminal Justice at the University of Portsmouth, who will present a paper on Incel ideology, discourse, and extreme forms of misogyny. The webinar is being recorded and then it will be uploaded to the British Society of Criminology Hate Crime Network YouTube channel. We will only record the presentation and then the Q&A will not be recorded. So if you have any questions or feedback, feel free to make a note and then share your questions, your feedback, your comments at the end of the presentation where we will not be recording the discussion. Anda will present for about 30 to 40 minutes and then we will have around maybe a quarter, like 15 minutes for questions, answers. But this is only an introduction. So if you would like to follow up with Anda or anyone else in the meeting today, if you have any opportunities or thoughts about, collaboration, feel free to do that. I will now hand over to Anda. Anda, we're really, really excited to have you today as guest speaker. Thank you so much for making the time today.
Thank you, Irene, for the invitation. I'm really looking forward to present some of my findings and also have a discussion on this topic. Great, so thank you for the introduction. So I'm a lecturer in cybercrime as well as a PhD candidate at the University of Portsmouth. And for the past 5 years, while conducting my PhD studies, my focus has been on the incel ideology as well as the manosphere, but particularly in how they mainstream and showcase their ideologies on mainstream social media platforms, reaching young audiences, in particular young men, and also their intersections with other hateful, harmful, and extremist groups, such as the far right, as well as recently we are looking at the incel ideology intersection with child sexual abuse and exploitation materials and seeing how these subcultures sort of feed upon each other and kind of, justify and agree with each other. And other than that, I'm also an IRMS fellow, so the Institute for Research on Male Supremacism, where we deal with all things to do with male supremacism as well as white supremacism, and a Voxpol member looking at extremism and terrorism on social media. All right, then without further ado, I'm gonna start with the presentation on the incel ideology, discourse, as well as extreme forms of misogyny. And I always like to add a little bit of a content warning before I start my presentations, and just to say that I adopt a Jane stance in favor of including unexpurgated content when documenting online misogyny to accurately represent the severity and brutality of misogynistic abuse online. And this ensures that the harms and the violence are not minimized, rather than just saying, this is very toxic content. I'm going to show some of the content. I'm not going to go, too much onto the deep end of how violent this content can be. But just a warning that you're going to see some of this type of content within the slides. Great, and then in terms of the presentation structure and what I'm going to cover, I'm going to present a little bit of the context of incels. For those of you that might not know incels, but maybe some of you, are quite familiar, so I'm going to try not to spend too much time on that, but still contextualize them. I'm going to talk a little bit of my methods, particularly how I study mainstream social media platforms. And then I'm going to discuss the hate stratagem framework, which I applied to incel TikTok content to demonstrate how women are created as the object of hate for incels, and how a lot of hate speech directed towards women is used to destroy women as a group. And this is covered in the recent book chapter. And then I'm going to discuss some of the implications and conclusions, and hopefully have a discussion on recommendations and what could be done. I do have some ideas there, but I'm definitely looking forward to hear everybody else's ideas on how could we tackle this problem that is so structural and so effectively everywhere at this point. Great, so as I said, I'm going to start with just a brief definition of incels. So perhaps you heard about them now because there's been so much media as well as, policy work, also like academics and news and also portrayals on TV shows. So incel is a portmanteau of involuntary and celibate. So it's an individual who desires to engage in sexual romantic relationships, but is unable to do so. And they are predominantly men. Now why I do say that the majority of them are men, but there are some women who consider themselves femcells. We're not really going to discuss them, but just to kind of note that there is a minority of women that identify with this. They are an online subculture, and they view themselves as extremely unattractive and unsuccessful in obtaining sexual and romantic relationship with women. And all of this is blamed on women as well as feminism, because they say that women are lookist, so that women are the only ones who judge men based on looks. They say that men don't do the same thing or not to the same extent. And also because feminism has sort of created more opportunities for women, and now women can afford to be picky, whereas in the past they could just get any man. They would, say they're going to take care of them. But now they are looking at how a man looks, the money they can offer and all that aspect. But the majority of the incel ideology focuses on unattractive men can never get a woman because women are very shallow and based everything on looks. Right, they also subscribe to the black pill ideology. So this is, quite a nihilistic ideology, which says that an attractive man cannot escape the social hierarchy that excludes them. They're always going to be rejected regardless of what they do. And this is again because of women. Women, they say, will always be cruel and reject unattractive men. Now on the slide here, I also have some images. A lot of my data is multimodal, so you can see some reasons for being an incel there. So being short, having an unattractive face. There's also a lot of racial aspects within the incel ideology, where people and men of different colors and races, as well as women, are seen as inferior. And also mental illness and neurodivergence is seen as a key factor in being an incel. But very much is the emphasis is on genetics, genetic determinism, which again affects somebody's race as well. You are born a particular race, they say you have lower chances of getting women. And as we're gonna see, this is blamed on women, right? Because women are portrayed to be the ones that are racist rather than incels and the manosphere in general that promote such ideas here. Now I put there some solutions to the incel conundrum. So some of them say that all you can do is accept your fate and lay down and rot. You're always going to be alone and there's nothing you can do, just suffer through it. There's also incitement to suicide across the incel members that encourage each other to commit suicide, which is of course of great importance to young men and boys, especially if they come within these communities, but also violence, right? You can also rise up and do something about your situation and the situation of all unattractive men and incels. And here's where we move from worldview to violence, right? So who is at blame for the situation? Well, women in general and feminists in particular. And so incels have been associated, and that's why they also got a lot of, media coverage, is that they've been associated with a lot of gender hate speech, online violence, so abuse and doxing of women, physical violence, and also numerous mass casualty events. So I'm not gonna go to the mass casualty events, but now there is a very long list, such as the Isla Vista killings, as well as the Plymouth attacks here within the UK. So there's quite a lot of documented, incel ideology influenced mass casualty and terrorist attack events. Now, where my research originally started 5 years ago is that a lot of the research at that time was being done on specific incel forums. And there is where we learned more of the, the violent aspects of incels and what they advocate for. So I put here again some quotes and some data from some of my colleagues from this field. See here. So on these specific incel forums, we've seen a lot of derogation of women. I'm not gonna read those words, but this is how they refer to them. Very, very rarely women are referred to as women. Females is the best you can get. And other that you have foids, which is a female humanoid, and a humanoid is not a human, right? It's a lot of dehumanization there, because they say women are not humans, right? They are like inferior. So we have the derogation of women. We also have the advocacy for abolishing women's rights. So here is a quote from Bailey et al. So all women are or should be slaves to men, cook, clean, and spread their legs when they're told to. Letting women get educated and have careers was a huge mistake. And here's what I also often say, that oftentimes we see that the incel ideology or violent misogynism is not political, but as we can see, it's very much political, right? It's talking about women's rights and restricting them in order to subjugate women yet again. So it's definitely about, the political aspects of how women can be stopped and put back into the position of being inferior, as women have been through that so many years ago. And then there was a lot of work through feminism of creating more gender equality. Other things that they recommend is direct incitement to violence against women. So this is from Jackie et al., the quote from a specific incel forum: disobedient wives should be beaten. We also have a lot of rape being encouraged and mentioned. And this is very typical of gender abuse online, right? If you don't like a woman, you're just going to threaten her with rape. And then we also have incitement to kill all women, right? And this is oftentimes the more extreme side that we see with incel discourse, but it's for revenge for what they've done to them, for example, by rejecting them. You also have a lot of glorification of attackers and attacks, such as the Isla Vista killings, and also encouragement to engage in violence. So from Jackie et al., we have another quote which says, "I want them all to die," and here the person was referring to women for rejecting them. Right, so that's what we know from these secluded forums, right? You have this very violent, overt and explicit language targeting women. So my question was, when I started this 5 years ago, how is this ideology, including its violent, linguistic, and visual content — I haven't included visual content for this violence aspect, but we're going to see some more from social media — but how it is adapted to feed mainstream social media platforms and popularize this ideology to larger and heterogeneous audiences? Because even though we know the social media platforms have their own limitations, and a lot of content escapes content moderation and goes against policy, still direct calls to violence like this and this free use of slurs has a large chance of being removed right from mainstream social media platforms. And so this was my first idea here to study this. And how I've done this is to an ethnographic observation of mainstream incel spaces, accounts, and data. And this took place between 2022 and 2025. So this was a longitudinal exploration of TikTok and YouTube. And you can see there's some of my data. I have identified 5 accounts from each platform, and then repeatedly monthly went onto their accounts and also looked at their biography, like the bio they have in the profile, to see how they express their identity and if they mention any changes. And quite a few changes have been seen there. I'm not going to talk now about their narratives because that's a different study. But I went on to observing them for these many years, and then also going through all of these videos and part of the comments. And I've just put some stats there so you can see the accounts ranging from 1K to 32K subscribers and followers, and then some of the videos from 1K to 1.6 million views per video. The accounts that I've chosen and the content was definitely not the most popular, because oftentimes incel content, as I said, through its very nature of being quite extremist, doesn't get as many views as you would have the typical manosphere content where you have influencers like Andrew Tate. However, that is changing, and I'm going to discuss that a little bit with looksmaxing, which black pill looksmaxing belongs to incels and how they view looksmaxing, and that is bringing a lot of more new audiences. But in general, 1.6 million views for a video within this category of specific incel subcultural tropes, it is quite a lot for this type of content. And how I analyze this is to multimodal thematic and discourse analysis, looking at the language, the visuals, but also the music and the sounds used, which that's quite interesting, but also for another study. And this is all part of my PhD dissertation and a series of publications. So we have the mainstream in the black pill, so looking at how this is mainstream on TikTok, and also the recent book chapter we had published with editors, with Irene as editors, and Joe Garland and Joe Smith. And this is the strategic use of gender-based hatred on TikTok, hate stratagems, information manipulation, and incel TikTok creators. So I'm particularly going to focus on this book chapter, but also draw on my other publications and other works within the mainstream space of incels. Right, so what I discovered, so on the surface level, right, remember those first quotes I showed, they were so violent and explicit. When I went onto TikTok and YouTube, it seemed that on mainstream platform, incel content was more implicit, and it seemed to showcase mostly men suffering because of today's social order. And there was also a lot of dissemination of facts. So they were just showing, okay, this is the fact, or this is a study that applies to the incel conundrum, and also quote-unquote scientific materials, because they're not quite scientific, concerning dating, women, men, more men being prone to suicide or being sexless. A lot of studies looking at that. And also the more recent inclusion of looks maxing content and advice. So advising men on how to improve their looks. So on the surface, it does seem more positive, right? It's just, all right, women is we suffer. Here are some studies about women, and here is some advice on how to improve. However, as you dig deeper to all of this sort of context, you do have that implicit messaging, which blames women for everything, right? For all of these aspects. And we're going to discuss that more in the following slides with the hate stratagem. So I'm going to contextualize these incel TikTok findings to the hate stratagem framework, but first I'm just going to provide an overview of the framework. So this comes from Willock's description of the strategic use of hate as a stratagem, which said the theoretical foundation and lens to examine how misogynistic incels portray women on TikTok. The hate stratagem denotes the use of hate appeals as intentional tools to persuade people into hatred. Right, so you have these appeals that attract people and basically inform and convince people to believe in the ideas that are being displayed to hate a particular scapegoat, right? A particular perpetrator that is seen to be the fault of everything that's happening to an in-group, which in this case is incels. So I collected and organized this data according to 4 steps from the stratagem, which first is reinforcing the in-group identity, which is incels' identity, and inflame their emotions. And here is particularly the feelings of victimization. The second is outgroup denigration and infliction of permanent harm on this outgroup, which of course in our case is women. And the third one is portraying the outgroup as a threat, right? Something that a group that's going to harm the in-group and therefore needs to be stopped. And so the fourth then step moves towards the quest to conquer this group and stopping them before they can harm the in-group even further. Alrighty, so first I'm going to start with the reinforcing of in-group identity and framing emotions. So in this part of the data, and a lot of the incel TikTok data focuses on bonds of common experience. So this is how incels perceive themselves as well as their experiences in society. And through this, we have the trope of male victimhood invoked quite a lot. And I divided this step in 2 steps. So first is establish the injustice towards the in-group, so towards incels. And I have here some images from the TikTok data. And a lot of it is focusing on how incels have sort of missed out within their life, missed out from romance as well as sexual and romantic relationships. And as you can see in that image with the skeletons, you can see that there's like a man that looks bigger there. That's kind of like the epitome of a chad, of an attractive man. He gets the women, he gets to enjoy his life, he gets to live his teen years, but incels and unattractive men are just completely ignored and ostracized from this, right? So there's a lot of feeling there of missing out on these important life experiences. And then other aspects just show how women, reject men, how these incel TikTok creators have tried to approach women, get into relationships and be happy, but they never managed to do that. So a lot of the content you can see with the pictures, realizing that I would never be enough. Or also my routine is very simple. I wake up and suffer, right? So you have a lot of that suffering included within the injustice towards the in-group, right? I suffer and you suffer like me. You get that relationship through the emotional appeal, right? It's like we are suffering together, you understand me. And as I said, I didn't include that here, but also the sounds and music used are very important. So between these videos, sometimes you have slides on TikTok. They use quite a lot of the carousel sort of way of showing content. And then you have a very sad song, or you have this character from American Psycho saying how he doesn't feel anything, he hates his life, and his life is basically nothing. So a lot of these sort of sounds and sound bites from movies and TV shows are used to kind of further, tell the viewer that, I'm suffering and maybe you identify with my suffering as well. Right, and then we move on to the identifying and blaming a common outgroup for these misfortunes. So who is at blame for this constant suffering, right? This life that never seems to get better. Well, women are identified as to be blamed for this, both implicitly and explicitly. So we can see to these images that, again, we have the suffering, but also the inclusion of she. So she will never care about you or emotionally open to you, like she will for Chad because the bones in your face are in the wrong shape. Right, so again, blaming women for not giving men, the love and affection they believe they deserve. And it's because women judge men solely based on physical characteristics, such as the shape of your bones, right? So you can't change the shape of your bones easily, at least, and you are always going to be rejected and alone. And we can see again, it's the Joker image in there. So a lot of the imagery we see and the audio we have sends to, mass killers, serial killers, people that are just out there to do violence, and also mental illness. Quite a lot of these characters are mentally ill. And then we see another image there in which we have a man looking for love, wanting to find a woman, and that woman never appears, right? And that lasso rope just leads him to a place to basically take his own life. And so we can see then that women are blamed, right, for this sort of behavior, for taking this from incel men. And that men are suffering from this. So the hate stratagem takes root each time the story depicts an injustice to others like us in the hands of the perpetrator, which are women, right? Women, by simply being interested in incels, could spare incels of all of this pain. And they just don't want to do this. And that's what, makes them so angry on women. And women are scapegoated as the primary culprits. And I would say, because I didn't say this at the beginning, you can see that on the hanging sort of drawing, there's like black there, is hidden. And you're going to see some more like that through the data. And this is how the incel TikTok creators cover this type of data. So it's not me doing it. They know that TikTok might remove content if they show like direct depiction of suicide or direct depiction of violence. So oftentimes they hide certain words or certain images just to make sure that the content is not going to be removed. All right, and now that we have identified the out-group that is responsible, we have inflamed the emotions of the in-group, what needs to be done is to denigrate and inflict irreparable harm on the out-group, which are women. So a lot of what's happening within this content on incel is that all women are portrayed as being the same group, right? If one woman behaves badly with an incel man, then all women are the same. And this is one of the major extremist viewpoints of incels, as well as other extremist and terrorist groups, where you just take one person and generalize them to be the entire group. And the entire group is seen as nefarious, right? And the same. So some of the examples that we see on mainstream social media, and particularly on TikTok and YouTube, is examples, anecdotal examples, like the two screenshots we see here of women just being rude, liars, or abusive or cheaters, saying that I cheated on my partner. But also in these particular examples I chose, this is just some of them, is women going on X or Twitter and saying, things like, do men shorter than 5'7" deserve human rights? And most women say they don't. And this obviously shows that this person has put a harmful poll. And I think we can all agree that, a poll like this and posts like this are really not needed, and they are harmful, especially for people that might struggle with their height or their looks, right? We wouldn't want to see this with looks or weight either. But the idea is that, anecdotes like this, I used to say that all women are like this. It's not just this one poster, it's all women. And there are a lot of evidence like this that is being posted on social media. We can see the other ones too, just being rude and abusive towards men. So this is the first stage, right, of denigrating the group. Then you have women being portrayed as racist. So this goes a bit deeper. And these are some examples of screenshots that I've taken from the content of the incel content creators. So the first one, for instance, was posted by a woman creator, and she says, when you're Latina, but you love your colonizers. Well, so basically it's Latina women that just wants to date white people, right? And a lot of times you see content like this, whether it's a Black woman, an Asian woman, Latin American women, and they have a white partner. It is said that these women are being racist and discriminatory towards their own race and ethnicity. You also have a lot of differences where you see that women basically abuse men of other ethnicities. And sometimes, women directly sort of post this abuse, such as in the third picture with this Bumble, I think, dating app. But sometimes it's just implied, right? Incels imply that women are saying something racist, where it's actually they're not saying anything, just to further demonize them. Now, apart from this, they also use, sort of scientific and pseudoscientific graphs, such as the desirability of men to women by race. And here we can see that most women prefer white men, and then the other races are down there. Now, it's quite interesting this goes into the use of scientific studies and also the use of the faking of scientific studies. So some of these actual graphs that we see within Incel content online are actually graphs taken from a particular study. However, that study is going to provide you with the context, who was the population, how many people were observed, and all of this context is taken out. A lot of the graphs, I think this particular one is also taken from online dating platforms. It's like, see, women prefer white men, but it's not really, it doesn't really have the scientific backing of academic paper that has been published. And on the other hand, you also have incels creating their own graphs in Excel and then saying, see, this is scientific research, right? But the problem here is that you don't see the authors, you don't see the data, you don't understand the context, and people are likely to kind of believe this misinformation. And then what's really important to do is to, take a screenshot of this data and reverse image search it. That's how I do it, to see if this is a real study, if it's made up and manufactured, or if it comes from just a social media app, social dating, sort of online dating app, and, where is the data coming from? Now, further, we see women being denigrated and, seen as harmful and toxic through hybristophilia. So this is a concept that refers to women being sexually or mentally attracted to criminals, including rapists, murderers, and pedophiles. And we have the typical examples, which I think are used quite a lot now by the far right as well. So we have examples from news: Syrian migrant rapist who attacked a schoolgirl, escapes Swiss jail and goes on the run with female prison guard who fell for him. Right, so a lot of these say that women are morally inferior because they go for rapists as well as for pedophiles and for general criminals. They are just attracted to these men because women, they say, are attracted to being abused, sexually assaulted, and all of these terrible things. And in terms of, well-known criminals and murderers, you had Ted Bundy, right, that had a variety of women attracted to him. So that's used a lot. Jeremy Meeks, as well as, of course, now Luigi Mangione, right, which has been in the news quite a lot. Also, some more of the disgusting part is with pedophiles, where, again, it's not really known where this data comes from, but one incel creator was doing this social experiment where he pretended to be an attractive pedophile, and he was saying on this app, on a dating app, that he's a pedophile, but he's interested in women. And according to him, he received so many messages from women saying that they don't care, right, about him being a pedophile. And again, for that, it's very difficult to say if it's a real experiment, quote unquote, run, or all of this data is manufactured. However, the point is clear. Women have these low sort of moral standards. If the man is attractive, then it doesn't matter what he's done. And here we also have an example from this study. And actually, this is from a real study done, I think, around 20 years ago, investigating women's rape fantasies. And this graph is showed on a lot of incel forums as well as on TikTok. And this is showing basically that women, according to this study, 62% of the women that have been surveyed here, we don't know how many, have fantasies about being raped, right? So they would say the majority of women want to be raped. So of course, they are attracted to criminals. Now, as disgusting as this is, we also have further dehumanization with a dog pill and animal pill. And this states that women are attracted to dogs and animals in general. So here we have some examples from what is being shared on TikTok. So the first one is a slide with information from the account creator and also from screenshots from various forums where apparently some women say that they have been attracted to animals. We also have news is being covered, and also a screenshot from the Incel wiki where the dog pill is explained with some examples and quote unquote evidence. And again, where these cases like this happen, obviously they are, disgusting and illegal. But from these cases, all women are being generalized as being this way, right? It's not just a few women, it's everybody, right? All women have the potential to be like this. So when supposed exposed immorality ranging from deceit to racism, sexual attraction to violent offenders, and even zoophilia have no reasonable defense, right? When you have a group that engages in so many terrible things, discussing things that it's not something you can defend morally, then you can portray this outgroup as a symbol of hate, right? And particularly a group that stands in opposition to in-groups and society's values. Because the in-group, so incels, do not think you should have, sex with animals, or do not think that criminals should be seen as these attractive and sexual people, even though they do that on their own with their own incel mass murderers. But the idea is that women are clearly standing against society and against incels' values. However, they are still at the top somehow. All right, so when you have such a, terrible group there, you also have a lot of harms towards the in-group, right? So we see that women are a threat and denigrated, but then you need to further, underscore what the threat consists of. And here I did mess up my animations a bit, so I think the text is gonna come after. Yep. So women as a group are portrayed as intentionally striving to harm men in general, but also incels in particular. So this is a form of a grief entitlement. So incels believe that women restrict unattractive men from fulfilling their supposed right to have sex and romantic experiences and relationships, right? So this is the first thing that you're doing to harm men, is the fact that you are restricting us from this right that every human being should have, which is to have sex and reproduce. And so the threats that are posed by women according to incels, and I created here a list. So women threaten the reproduction rights of incels and attractive men. Then also, and this is quite an important one, women supposedly fake sexual harassment and abuse claims to humiliate, control, and punish unattractive men. And again, as I need to go back to just show this, so there are examples like this with a man saying that he asked a girl for a number on campus, and then he was interrogated and seen as a sexual offender just for asking for the phone number. Also, you have comedic, right, portrayals of this. And this is also part of the mainstream aspect. You see a cat and a dog doing something funny, but the text says ugly men trying to talk to women without getting 69 years for fake sexual assault. So again, this is a lot more easily digestible, right? It's a funny video, but it's like, if you just talk to a woman, you could go to prison because women have the power in society. They can just put you to prison for looking at them. And then some other posts that I shared. So women hate men they deem undesirable. If you're short, they will hurt you, hit you, make fun of you. If you're ugly, they will treat you like nothing. They'll accuse you of assault if you even stare at them. Right? So this is the general belief that women have all this power, and without any evidence, the man is going to be prosecuted and arrested. And then this goes hand in hand with this aspect, right? So then, of course, this goes with the wider stereotype and misinformation that's spread on social media and generally that women fake sexual harassment and assault claims, or that they fake quite a few of them rather than a small minority. Right? And this is presented as a systemic issue and the result of feminist advances. So again, women are involved within the criminal justice system and they are destroying it, right, by fabricating this. So again, you need to stop them, right, because they are literally interfering with the criminal justice system. It's gone too far, basically, right? And then I also really like to talk about this divorce rape, right? So rape is never really seen as something important when a woman is being raped. And as we said before, they portrayed women as wanting to be raped. However, and this is like a very smart use of the term rape, they kind of use the term rape now to apply it to men and exclusively to men through the term divorce rape, right? And divorce rape means that a woman might pretend to like a man, an unattractive man, but actually she's in for the money, right? So the typical gold digger stereotype. And then she's going to divorce this man and rape him through getting divorced, which means, and the rape aspect is the fact that she's going to get the majority of the money, they say, right? And you see a lot of this being, portrayed through incel content. Another example, which is not here, which again is very derogatory and minimizes the experiences of rape of both women and men that are actually being sexually raped, is that they show like a meme being like, women cry that men cannot experience rape like them, and then they show, but actually men get raped over every day because they lose at investments. So this person was showing like a cryptocurrency coin he invested in, and then it went down, and he said, this is rape for men. We lose an investment, so our experiences of losing an investment in cryptocurrency is the same as women being raped, right? So it's very much making them as being as equal and not really seeing the deeper harms of sexual assault. So based on all of this, women, right, are quote unquote terrible in every possible way, and they are also an imminent threat to the in-group and all men, not only to reproduction, but also having power over the criminal justice system. And assaulting men in various ways, whether metaphorically or physically here. To protect the in-group from the evil interference of women, the out-group must be conquered as well as destroyed. Cool, and this slide is very busy. I didn't have the time to go and make it a bit more succinct, which I usually try to. But conquering the out-group and the double law of incel-based hate speech. Just taking on the time, I'm gonna be almost done. So one characteristic of hate crime is that the perpetrator rarely takes something of value. Instead, what what they want to do is to deface or destroy something of value. And conquering does not require physical eradication, right? We can see that it can be done through the discursive subjugation and character assassination of an out-group. And it's particularly important in the sphere of public discourse and social media, and nowadays where everything, right, circulates, communication circulates all over the place. And if you manage to portray a group in a negative way, you could have already metaphorically conquered them, right? Because they are seen as inexcusable and terrible, right? So you can create irreparable damage and permanent damage by painting the actions of the out group as inexcusable and the group itself as unsalvageable, right? After everything we've seen, how women are being denigrated, they are not likely to be savage, right? Can you go beyond, can you kind of forgive somebody that apparently, engaged in sexual relationship with animals? Like a lot of the claims are phrased that way. However, it's quite interesting that within the incel ideology, and as opposed to other hate groups, women are both the dominant and nefarious outgroup prosecuting incels, but also the valued resource, right? So then eradicating women is not something that could be done, right? Because then incels are not going to meet their aspirations of getting into sexual and romantic relationships. So instead, what is recommended and what is needed according to incels and manosphere groups in general is for women to be stripped of the social status and privileges, right? And be controlled to regressing back to an historical era, which is called now the Golden Age, where men had an unchecked power over women and were able to subjugate them, dominate them, and also dictate all aspects of their lives. And I put a little comment already in motion as we see that the rights of women and liberties of women are being restricted, and in the Western world, right, which we haven't seen for a while. And to say here that the quest to conquer women is a play throughout the stratagem, right, convincing the audience that women are not only privileged, so have the power over you, but also are of no real value to society. And in fact, they are harming society through all of these different ways. And I also want to say this, that while most incel men do not engage in physical violence towards women, you have these hate appeals that are now being mainstream on this popular social media, and these play a key role in justifying and inciting hatred and encouraging violence. Now I'm just going to go briefly to this because I appreciate we are at 40. So in addition to this hate stratagem, I also say that looks maxing, which is a new and very popular trend, is the vehicle for the incel ideology. And just to kind of rephrase, so it's not a new trend, it's now being discovered and put forward, but it's been existing for many years, so it's not new, the way I said it before, right? But this shows that there's evidence that incel language and worldview is embedded within youth discourse and online trends. So looks maxing was very much associated with manosphere communities and incels, and now is more and more popular. And you can see that there's like a little tablet with blue there, which is not, the visibility is not great, but it just shows how the terms and hashtags related to looks maxing have billions and millions of views. And they're very popular on TikTok, so that data is from TikTok. So it's a portmanteau of looks and maximizing and refers to the practices aimed at optimizing physical appearance. And it's very much pushed to men and recommended by men. So you can see here some examples with toxic beauty, the rise of looks maxing influences. And there's things that are, they can be things that are not harmful necessarily, like, getting a haircut or using some particular cream. But then it does go on to extreme weight loss, mewing. Maybe you've seen this, like in the image there, to kind of increase your jaw size. But then it goes to more harmful things like steroid use, skin bleaching, because as we said, women are portrayed as being racist, so then you want to be more white, cosmetic procedures, and also extreme plastic surgery. So a lot of these incel men that believe in looks maxing, they recommend things like changing the shape of your bone structure or getting leg lengthening surgery if you are too short, and women reject you for that. Now, of course, we do have the more extreme procedures such as bone smashing and hammer smashing. It is unknown how much people actually do this or believe that it is a legitimate way of improving your looks. So what this means, bone smashing, is taking a hammer on a blunt object and hitting your facial structure to create trauma here and make your jaw look more prominent. And you have, various very popular looks-maxing influencers promoting this on social media. And there's this debate whether is this just trolling, is this a joke, is this serious? These creators say that it's serious, but at the end of the day, if you have an impressionable young boy, right, that is not happy with their looks, are they gonna necessarily think that this is a joke, or are they gonna be likely to try this at home? Because obviously getting fillers and getting steroids is gonna be difficult to get. But we do see a rise in illicit pharmaceuticals being recommended to these young people to just buy them off the dark web and be able to kind of inject yourself with various substances. Now, this trend is trending on social media. And it's closely linked to the incel ideology. There are looks-maxers that are not incels, but also very much closely linked to the ideology. And also, basically, the point is that men need to go to these procedures and looks-max because women have unrealistic expectations. So it comes back to women if you think about the reason for looks-maxing. And the question that I have here is what happens if these extensive, harmful, and costly procedures do not deliver the expected results, which is sex or relationship with women? What happens then? Are the looks-maxing influencers going to be blamed? Or are women going to be blamed for being so unrealistic in their expectations? Alrighty, and I'm gonna finish on this one, just have time for a discussion. So overview and implications. So women are established as the object of hate, and this is justified through the scientific evidence we see in anecdotal examples, as well as that emotional suffering and male victimhood. And then we do have this amplified through looks-maxing content, which capitalizes on valid anxieties that young men have, right? And links quite a lot to mental health and self-harm. Then we see that there is covert terminology and self-censorship. So we see this departure from incel content observed on more secluded incel spaces. So you're able to see that while the content was still very much harmful, it was not as overtly extreme as the ones we've seen on the secluded forums. So this discourse is implicit enough to escape content moderation, but it's also apparent enough to be harmful and perpetuate hateful beliefs against women. And just gonna jump to the last point. So I also want to say that this is interlinking to everyday sexism, right? So especially a lot of these stereotypes are not something incels or the manosphere came up with. It's something that we have within our culture, and it's the continuum, the continuum of sexual violence as well as gender-based violence against women. They're just more amplified nowadays by being on social media, and they provide justification for violence against women. Now, I just want to put here, but I would like to go to the question, and sorry for being a little bit too long on this. So just recommendations to tackle these issues, looking at what can content moderation do, legislation, cultural shifts needed, but I'm happy to hear your suggestions as well. I have time for discussion now rather than going further with the slide. And these are just my details, so feel free to contact me at my email or my LinkedIn. All right.